The sharp click-clack of a metal tape measure echoed down the hallway. My husband, David, had been dead for less than 48 hours. I was still wearing the stiff black dress from his funeral. I stood in the doorway of my 4-year-old daughter's bedroom, staring at the nightmare unfolding inside. Kevin, my older brother, was casually dragging the tape across the walls, planning the layout for his new executive office. Lily's stuffed animals were already kicked into a careless pile in the corner. My mother, Barbara, stepped right up to me. She pointed a manicured finger directly at my face. "You have always been useless. Kevin is taking over the real estate company now. Pack up your loud kid and send her to the country. I am not changing diapers for a freeloader's baggage. I spent my entire childhood serving as the designated garbage can so my mother could worship her golden child. Kevin got the praise, the private tutors, and the brand new cars. I got the leftovers and the lectures. Every time he failed, she found a way to make it my fault." Standing in my daughter's ruined bedroom, looking at the two of them stepping over David's memory, the familiar sting of worthlessness crawled up my throat. But then, my mother kept talking. Her voice pitched up into a frantic, reedy shrill that I had never heard before. She paced over Lily's scattered toys, waving her hands. She demanded I sign the business over to Kevin by Friday. She revealed she had taken out a second mortgage on her house to fund his tech startup last year, and the bank was threatening foreclosure. They needed the cash flow from David's company right now. The air in the room suddenly felt incredibly still. The puzzle pieces snapped together. This was not just about cruelty. This was about sheer, unadulterated panic. My mother was drowning in debt because of her precious son, and she was trying to hijack my dead husband's life's work to use as a life raft. A few years ago, that realization would have shattered my heart. Today, at 32 years old, it just made my vision crystal clear. I work as a high school administrator. My entire career revolves around managing entitled adults and teenagers throwing tantrums. I deal with bullies every single day. I forced my jaw to relax. I pressed my fingernails into my palms until the sharp pain completely grounded me. My job has taught me one universal truth about greedy, desperate people. If you fight them, they escalate. But if you simply hand them the shiny toy they are screaming for, they grab it so fast they never stop to check if it has a bomb inside. I looked at my mother's sweaty, flushed face. I looked at Kevin, who was already pantomiming where his oversized desk would go. I took a slow, deep breath and nodded. I told them quietly that if that was what they both wanted, Kevin could have the company. David's real estate business looked like an absolute goldmine from the outside. $850,000 a year in revenue sounds incredibly impressive, until you actually open the ledger. The reality was a sinking ship strapped with $800,000 in highly toxic debt. We are talking about unpaid internal revenue service liabilities, 2 pending contractor lawsuits, and a massive 5-year commercial lease he simply could not break. David knew his heart was failing months before he died, and he made absolutely sure Lily and I would not sink with that ship. He quietly updated the beneficiaries on his life insurance and his retirement accounts. $1,500,000. Clean, non-probate cash transferred directly to my personal bank account, completely untouchable by his business creditors or his legal estate. I started packing Lily's favorite books into cardboard boxes. The sharp rip of an envelope cut through the quiet house. I stepped out of the bedroom and caught my mother standing at the kitchen island, brazenly tearing through my personal mail. She held the official notice of beneficiary transfer from the insurance company. Her eyes darted rapidly across the heavy black ink. $1,500,000. Her jaw literally dropped. I watched her lifelong greed instantly mutate into something much more dangerous. She realized I was not just a useless, grieving widow. I was holding a liquid fortune. She dropped the letter on the granite counter, marched straight into the master bedroom, and started violently yanking David's suits off their hangers. She shoved his ties and expensive jackets into a black garbage bag, crushing the fabric he used to carefully iron every single morning. She wanted to break me. She wanted me to feel so utterly defenseless that I would surrender the entire estate just to make her stop tearing my life apart. I leaned against the doorframe, crossed my arms, and forced a faint, polite smile. Let her throw the clothes, let her claim the hollow throne. The grave was already dug, and I was just waiting for her to jump in. Marcus slid a heavy, single-page document across the mahogany conference table. He ignored Kevin completely and looked directly at my mother. He strongly advised a 14-day hold for a full forensic audit. He pointed out that I was surrendering an $850,000 revenue stream without a single counteroffer, warning her that people do not just walk away from that kind of money. He knew something was wrong. The trap was set. Now I just needed her to step inside. I pulled the transfer documents closer to my chest. I made my fingers tremble against the edges of the paper. I looked down at my lap and let my voice waver. I whispered that maybe Marcus was right. that David had worked so hard to build this. I pretended to rethink my decision, murmuring that I should probably keep the company for Lily's future. The reaction was instantaneous. My mother's face flushed a deep, panicked crimson. She looked at me, not as a grieving widow, but as a stupid, hysterical girl who was about to accidentally ruin her golden child's financial rescue. In her deeply arrogant mind, there was simply no universe where I possessed the intelligence to orchestrate a financial ambush. She genuinely believed Kevin was a brilliant businessman destined for greatness, and I was just a naive, emotional roadblock. Her desperate need to elevate him completely blinded her to the very obvious cliff she was dragging him toward. There is a profound, twisted satisfaction in watching a narcissist use their own towering ego to load the gun and point it directly at their own foot. She slammed her hand flat on the table, rattling the coffee cups. She absolutely refused to let me back out. Snatching the heavy gold pen right out of Marcus's hand, she shoved it directly into Kevin's chest and ordered him to sign the personal guarantee assumption right that second. Kevin clicked the pen. He never even glanced at the liability clauses. With a smug little smirk, he scribbled his name across the bottom line, legally chaining himself personally to $800,000 of toxic, inescapable corporate debt. Marcus, a veteran attorney who knew exactly what a fatal mistake looked like, turned the color of wet ash. He leaned back in his leather chair and slowly rubbed his temples. I picked up my signed copy of the surrender forms. I stopped trembling. I looked my mother dead in the eye, gave her a bright, perfectly relaxed smile, and walked out into the fresh air. 3 weeks later, the Internal Revenue Service dropped the hammer. They completely froze Kevin's operating accounts to recover the massive unpaid payroll taxes. The illusion of his shiny new real estate empire shattered overnight. Barbara frantically called Marcus, screeching into the receiver, demanding he immediately sue me for fraud. Marcus had zero interest in sinking with their ship. His response was ice cold. He reminded her that he had drafted a formal advisory warning her not to sign without an audit, and she had signed a waiver ignoring his legal counsel. He officially dropped her as a client and told her never to call his office again. The line went dead. She was completely legally stranded. And cornered animals always go for the throat. 2 days later, a social worker knocked on my apartment door. Child Protective Services. Someone had filed an anonymous, highly detailed report claiming I was severely neglecting and abusing Lily. My blood turned to absolute ice. The sheer venom required to use a grieving 4-year-old child as a pawn in a financial shakedown was staggering. Even for my own mother. Before the social worker even pulled out her clipboard, my phone rang. Barbara's name flashed brightly on the screen. I took a slow breath. I answered the call, put the phone on maximum speakerphone, and set it gently on the bookshelf. Directly in front of the lens of my hidden nursery camera, the little red recording light blinked steadily. I kept my voice perfectly flat. I enunciated every single syllable for the microphone. I asked her to clarify her demand, confirming out loud that she wanted me to wire her David's $1,500,000 life insurance, or else she would not withdraw the fake Child Protective Services report about me. She took the bait instantly. Blinded by desperation, she screamed right into the receiver. She insisted I owed them that money, accusing me of stealing it from my brother. She threatened that if I did not wire the funds to his account by 3 o'clock that day, the state would take Lily away. She hung up. She was completely unaware she had just confessed to felony extortion in high-definition audio and video. I picked up my phone. I turned to the social worker standing in my living room. Her jaw was slack. Her eyes were wide with absolute shock. I popped the memory card out of the camera and handed it to her. 30 minutes later, I walked through the heavy glass doors of the local police precinct. I bypassed the waiting chairs, marched straight up to the desk sergeant, and slid a copy of the recording across the scratched metal counter. The trap had officially snapped shut. The heavy steel handcuffs clicked shut around my mother's wrists right in the middle of her pristine front lawn. Her perfectly styled hair clung to her sweaty, flushed forehead. Her chest heaved in shallow, panicked gasps. Her eyes darted wildly, searching the crowd for someone, anyone, to intervene and save her. Instead, her wealthy Oak Park neighbors just stood safely on their manicured porches, pulling their robes tighter and whispering behind their hands. The flawless, upper-class reputation she spent 30 years obsessively building disintegrated into absolute humiliation in less than 30 seconds. Kevin stayed completely frozen. He sat slumped against the front porch pillar, staring blankly at the crumpled personal bankruptcy notice in his shaking hand. The golden child was finally forced to pay his own tab, and he had absolutely no idea how to survive in a world where my husband and I were not footing the bill. They were utterly, permanently, alone. I shifted my car into drive and steered away from that house for the very last time. The late afternoon sun spilled across my new kitchen table. The apartment felt light, airy, and entirely mine. Lily sat in her high chair, covered in bright orange cheese sauce, giggling uncontrollably because she firmly believed dinosaur-shaped pasta tasted far superior to regular pasta. I sat across from her, holding a cup of coffee that was actually still warm. I unlocked my phone and opened my banking application. $1,500,000. Safe. Clean. Untouchable. For the first time since David's heart stopped beating, I took a breath that did not fracture my chest. The heavy, suffocating anchor of my toxic bloodline was finally severed. I wiped a smudge of cheese off my daughter's nose and smiled. I finally had absolute peace. The heavy wooden gavel slammed down exactly 3 months later. The judge, sitting behind the towering oak bench, did not care about my mother's country club memberships, her pristine lawn, or her perfectly tailored blazers. He stared down at her and sentenced her to 4 years in a state correctional facility for felony extortion, with eligibility for parole only after 36 agonizing months. The court also ordered full financial restitution, but the financial bloodbath did not end there. 2 weeks later, Kevin stood trembling before a federal bankruptcy judge. The court ordered the immediate liquidation of every single asset he owned, to cover the $800,000 in corporate debt he had so eagerly signed for. He lost his luxury car. He lost his savings. He even lost the beautiful house our mother had secretly mortgaged to fund his delusions. The neighbors in upscale Oak Park stopped whispering and started actively crossing the street whenever Kevin walked by. The fake, glittering prestige she had spent 3 decades obsessively building evaporated into absolutely nothing. 6 months into her sentence, a crumpled white envelope arrived in my mailbox. The return address was stamped with the blue seal of the state penitentiary. The letter inside consisted of 3 pages covered in frantic, looping handwriting. She tried to play the ultimate victim one last time. She wrote that she did it all for the family, that she was only trying to protect my brother, and that no matter what happened, she was still my mother. She expected anger. She expected a furious, tear-stained reply. A year ago, a letter like that would have completely ruined my entire month. I would have agonized over every single twisted sentence. Instead, I stood by my kitchen trash can, reading the final paragraph. My pulse remained perfectly steady. I dropped the pages right into the damp coffee grounds and tied the plastic garbage bag shut. I felt absolutely nothing. My life today looks entirely different. My apartment is filled with the kind of deep, resonant quiet that actually heals your soul. My weekends are no longer spent walking on fragile eggshells around people who view me as a convenient emotional punching bag. Last Sunday, my closest friends, the incredible women who actually held my hand and held me upright through David's funeral, came over for a barbecue. We sat out on the sunlit balcony, drinking sweet iced tea and watching Lily chase iridescent soap bubbles across the wooden deck. There was no screaming. There were no hidden agendas or cruel, passive-aggressive remarks. We just laughed until our stomachs physically hurt. I finally understand what a real family feels like. It feels like breathing clean air after spending your entire life underwater. If you are listening to my voice right now, and you feel hopelessly trapped by the people who share your last name, I need you to listen very closely. You are allowed to walk away from people who hurt you. Blood does not make you family. Respect and unwavering loyalty do. Sometimes, the people who share your exact DNA are the ones holding the sharpest, deadliest knives. Trust is earned through actions, not automatically owed simply because of an accident of birth. Radical compliance is the absolute ultimate weapon. You do not have to scream at a narcissist. You do not have to fight them in the mud or try to desperately prove your worth. Sometimes, the most devastating revenge is stepping aside, smiling politely, and happily handing them the exact rope they are aggressively demanding. Let their own toxic arrogance and blinding greed do the heavy lifting for you. The single greatest inheritance you can possibly leave your children is the fierce courage to set unbreakable boundaries. I walked away so my daughter would never, ever have to learn how to shrink herself to fit inside someone else's twisted ego. Look closely at the people standing in your life right now. Are you bleeding yourself completely dry to protect a real family? Or are you just feeding people who use your shared bloodline to drain your spirit? You do not have to set yourself on fire just to keep them warm. Share this story if you are finally ready to pick up the scissors. I know exactly what you are screaming at the screen right now. You are watching Hannah's story and yelling, why did she put up with being treated like a garbage can for her entire life? Why did it take her husband passing away for her to finally fight back? It is so easy to judge from the outside, but when you are raised by a toxic, narcissistic parent, you are trapped in a psychological trap known as the slot machine effect, or intermittent reinforcement. You pull the lever 100 times and get nothing but criticism, manipulation, and pain. But on the 101st pull, you get a tiny crumb of affection. A rare smile. A brief moment of approval. That tiny, unpredictable payout literally rewires your brain to keep playing a losing game. Hannah was not weak, and she was not stupid. She was deeply conditioned to keep pulling that lever hoping that if she was just accommodating enough, her mother would finally love her. But the moment the illusion shattered, Hannah woke up and executed an absolute masterclass in financial self-defense. Let us break down her exact strategy so you can learn how to protect yourself if you ever face a predator in your own life. First, let us talk about the audit strategy. Scammers and manipulators absolutely hate details, and they hate patience. When the attorney begged for a 14-day forensic audit of the real estate company, Hannah knew her mother's arrogance would completely override basic business logic. By playing the hesitant, reluctant victim, Hannah intentionally triggered her mother's blinding greed. She weaponized their underestimation of her, allowing them to eagerly sign up for $800,000 in toxic corporate debt. Second, we saw the buyout. Sometimes, the smartest financial move you can make is simply walking away from the table. Hannah handed over the prestigious company, but she fiercely protected the $1,500,000 in clean, non-probate life insurance. She essentially invested in her own permanent freedom. She let them have the hollow, sinking ship while she quietly walked away with the actual treasury. Finally, she mastered building the case. When her mother escalated to criminal extortion using a fake child protective services threat, Hannah did not scream back. She did not defend her character or try to reason with an unreasonable person. Instead, she put the phone on speaker, confirmed the demands out loud, and let the nursery camera capture every single syllable. She built an airtight, high-definition criminal case that handed her abuser a 4-year sentence in a state penitentiary. Here is the ultimate verdict for you today. Toxic people will always view your boundaries as a declaration of war because they are entirely used to living rent-free in your territory. But your peace of mind is the single most expensive asset you will ever own. Do not let anyone bankrupt your soul simply because you share the same bloodline. Have you ever had to use radical compliance or a smart financial exit strategy to escape a toxic family member or partner? I want to hear your story. Drop it down in the comments below. And if this breakdown helped you see things clearly, hit that subscribe button for more real-life strategies on how to protect your peace, your family, and your wallet. Stay smart, stay safe, and I will see you in the next one.